Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Blend Radio. I would say welcome back because I know you've listened before. Today is our first Friday Toast to the Arts and Parks show with Nancy Reed and Lisa Smith. We're the mother-daughter travel team and publishers of two digital publications. We've got Big Blend Radio and TV Magazine, that's our variety publication, and Parks and Travel Magazine that obviously covers parks and travel, but also our Love Your Parks tour. We're traveling full-time, documenting parks across the country. Now, speaking of parks, one of our favorite partners is the National Parks Arts Foundation. They're a nonprofit that creates these awesome month-long artist-in-residence experiences. And we're talking for artists, whether you're a photographer, a dancer, a poet, a musician, anything that you want to go and submit to these residencies. They're really unique. You can stay in a park unit for a month. Places like Dry Tortugas off in the Florida Keys. We've got places like Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, Chaco Canyon in northern New Mexico, Death Valley. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So check it out. Go to nationalparksartsfoundation.org. We love it because we get to interview their artists every single month here on the first Friday Toast to the Arts and Parks show. And today we're chatting with landscape, black and white analog photographer and darkroom expert. We're talking about the real deal here with Cody-Brothers. He's based in Santa Fe. He's got a lab there as well. You're going to want to check out his website. If you shoot an analog style and actually use film, go to visionsphotolab.com, but I encourage you to look at his website, Cody-Brothers.com, and that's brothers, B-R-O-S, Cody-Brothers.com. And he's going to be joining us to talk about his residency in Death Valley National Park. He was there in January this year. So welcome, Cody. How are you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing good. We're doing good. I'm very excited going through your photography. It's really interesting because you do black and white, and it seems black and white has a different emotion. What led you to go, I'm doing black and white versus color?
It's more dramatic in my opinion, and it's more, I don't know. It's of course my opinion, but I feel it's more dramatic and it emphasizes the textures and the composition a little bit more. It's not so reliable on, especially in today's age, how most digital images are so oversaturated and just all about the color instead of the composition and the textures and the tones involved with the images.
Yeah, yeah, and you're shooting analog, which is different. So for some of us, we go back to VHS. Like I go to VHS videos, and I'm like the old school of wanting cassette tapes. And then hey, we had 8 tracks way back when, but this is kind of like analog. You don't get to hear that word very much these days in photography.
Yeah, it's there's actually a lot of the kids a lot of the millennials are kind of coming back to it, much like they are with vinyl.
Yeah,
and are interested in it because they're kind of more interested in finding out the foundations and the sources of where photography kind of came from. And digital, the whole thing with digital is the immediate gratification. And there's a whole lot of people that are still like not immediately knowing what you got, hoping that you got it right. And then they love when they see their negatives or their contacts, there's like this different look on them compared to when they're looking at the back of the screen on their camera.
Yeah.
I think this reminds me of going from oil painting to using acrylic paints.
Exactly.
And oil paints are buttery and warm and, I don't know, somehow richer in color. And acrylic paints, it took me a long time to tone them down. They were kind of garish and the colors were kind of plasticky.
And they dry so quick.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons I wanted them. But then I was like, no, actually, I don't want them now. And then they came out with the alkyd paints that were kind of a mixture between the two. I thought, well, that's interesting, but you know, it is really different when you change your ideas or you change any kind of medium. You go to black and white if you're used to shooting color, then you're going to struggle for a while, I think, because I think you have to look at things from a whole different side of your brain in a way.
No question. No question. I really believe, I really feel that people that are used to just shooting color all the time, and this is one of the things about my feelings about the difference between analog and digital, especially when it comes to black and white. Everything's, you know, yeah, you can put the little switch on there to shoot black and white, but everything's being shot and processed in color with a digital camera, and then being transferred or flipped to a grayscale, where black and white film is still that the whole process, from the way you take the capture, you see the light, how you expose the film to the point of then pulling and pushing it in the processing to even it out or to create more of an effect. All those things are lost with digital. It's just not there. And I really, once again, my opinion, I'm not saying this is exact, because I'm sure there's many people listening that'll oppose it, but the tonality, the gradation tonality in film still, to me, is untouchable. It is just from the darkest dark to the brightest bright, and everything in between. If you really know the whole process well, and you've kind of made it an art form, as I have, your results are just so much better, in my opinion.
Have you tried shooting in color, and then you go into Photoshop and just say, no, make it black and white, and then compare it to a similar photograph that you've taken in the same spot, see the difference between those two methods? Like shooting real black and white versus I just let Photoshop do the work.
Well, the thing is I because I own a lab here in Santa Fe, I see so much digital stuff of a lot of the same areas I shoot, and I also take people out. People, you know, will ask to go out on a trip with me, and a lot of the people I take out shoot digital. So, you know, they're shooting side by side with me, so I see their images compared to mine, and it's enough. It's been 20 years or more, now about 25 years that I've seen it, and in no way has there ever been a point to where I've gone, well, I need to go digital.
Right.
And that's been one of the things that, you know, is always confirming to me that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, even though it's a lot of painstaking effort to still shoot film and carry the equipment and everything that goes along with it, and not having the immediate gratification of it. There's so many times where I'll be at a park, or it's like at Zabriskie Point in Death Valley is a perfect example. When sunrise and sunsets, you'll have 30 to 50 photographers all set up along a ridge line, basically trying to get this shot. And in most of your digital photographers, a lot of them will just basically hold the button down and take as many shots as the card will hold. Yeah. Well, like with my camera, my panoramic camera, I only get 4 shots a roll.
Wow. And then
so you have to really be picky and choosy of when you shoot, and you know, because it takes time to reload and all those other things. So a lot of times I compare it to hunting, and I'm kind of the analog photographer, is kind of the bow and arrow hunter.
But it's a process. But I think, and that's the other part is, you know, I know a really good landscape photographer also does parks, and I was just reading his blog post about the fact that he prints out his own photographs. He won't let a lab do it. He has to print them
Yeah.
out because he knows the coloring, because he said, even when you look at a photo on a computer, you're looking through, and Nancy always carries on about this, everyone's screen is different. It's all
Right.
calibrated different. And he goes, there's this thing about printing your own work and being the part of that process, because what comes out and what goes into a customer's hands needs to be as authentic as the experience of taking the photo. Do you feel the same way too, with especially with what you're doing in the lab and doing the dark room? And
Oh, well, part of our lab, we still have all the analog services. So we still have the, darkroom printing, and then we also have digital printing as well, digital services and digital printing. And what I end up doing with most photographers is they'll bring me their, their card or whatever they want me to print, and we'll look at it on my monitor, which is calibrated to my printer.
okay.
And then when we sit and look at it, I ask them, well, what differences do you see? And we make the adjustments there. And then what I usually do is I print them a proof. And if they want an enlargement, I print a small, like an 11 by 14 proof. And then let's say they're making a 30 by 40. I'll make a mag test of a strip of that photograph at the actual size. So if it's like 30 by 40, I'll make a mag test 30 inches by like 10 inches of a strip of, like, let's say the middle of the photograph, so that we can not only check the resolution. The big thing when you have digital photography and compare, once again, in comparison to analog photography, is resolution. A lot of people come in and they're shooting with their phone, and they see my photograph and they say, well, I want it as big as yours. Well, your phone's never going to allow that photograph to go that big because of the pixelization. And then you have people with all different types of megapixel cameras, from 12, all the way up to like the professionals I deal with that are shooting 100 megapixel cameras that are, cost $50,000 to $100,000. Well, they can go as large as they want and not have to worry about the resolution. But most people, most of your just hobbyists that have a good camera, they want it big, but you have to, print a mag test to show them, hey, this is what the resolution is going to look like. And that's how we usually, from the lab standpoint, handle people and get them zeroed in on what they're printing, and so they feel comfortable with what they're getting. It's a very difficult process because, like you're saying, everyone's monitor looks different, and so many people are looking at their images on a laptop or on a tablet, which is even worse because there's no way of really calibrating that near as well as like a really nice monitor.
This is interesting to me, and for just even if you're not a photographer, just in what you're purchasing and getting to know that part of it. The thing too with you going out in Death Valley now, wasn't this the 5th year, like the 5th January you've been out shooting there? And I know that you also did a couple of workshops, and I know that's what happens. Every artist that goes into a residency with the National Parks Arts Foundation does do some kind of event, whether it's a performance or a workshop or a talk. And with you actually took people out, right? You actually, as part of your workshop, out shooting with you, out filming.
Yeah, we did that on Friday. We had a workshop out at Zabriskie Point in the morning on Friday, and then had a presentation that Friday night at 7 o'clock. And they have a little auditorium there with a projector that you can plug in a computer or laptop to and show a PowerPoint show. But we went out 6:30. Zabriskie Point, and did the shot that everybody knows, and then went down into the gulch, and I showed them where better shots were. So where it's like you don't have to, just because everyone's standing up on the point and that's where everyone's lined up, if you do travel and be a little bit of adventurous and go to a different place, you can actually get a lot better shots. And that's kind of what the workshops I'm doing there, I'm kind of concentrating on. Here's the shot, here's the time that you have to be there for the one that everyone's shooting. But here, come with me and I can show you how this gets better. And that's kind of, we have another workshop next Wednesday in the sand dunes and doing the same thing.
Oh, wow. So yeah, you go in this, that's the thing. Death Valley is like a massive park. You've been shooting it for a long time. And what I found interesting about your photography on Death Valley is catching the lighting, the textures. It's, you see geology in a whole different way, you know, when you're looking at your photographs, and in the black and white, and doing it through film. It's just, and just obviously composition and everything that goes into taking a really amazing photograph. But it just seems like it's like a learning experience when you're looking at the photos of the geology, and when you're photographing that. Is that something you think about, is getting people to understand the different textures? Because there's a lot of color in Death Valley too.
Oh, no question. And that's the biggest thing of most of the time when I'm end up running into another photographer and talking to them, they're just blown away that I'm shooting black and white, because, well, why are you shooting black and white? There's so much color here. And that's Death Valley it's unbelievably colorful. Artist palette, for example, it just looks like someone just spilled, Jackson Pollock from the heavens just threw paint on all the mountains. That's basically what it looks like. And it's very challenging to capture that with black and white. You have to really concentrate on the composition and the textures, and the light is of the ultimate importance. And the thing about Death Valley is your window for that light is so small. You have to be there at dark, ready to go. And as the light comes up, it just gets better and better and better. But then once it's up, you have such a small window before it's all flat. And then you basically scout during the middle of the day, go to other locations that really don't, like the mines. The history of a lot of the locations in Death Valley, the old mines, are great things to do during the middle of the day, because they're not as dependent on the light being at the right angle. It could be more overhead. But then in the end of the day, the other thing you have to remember about Death Valley is if you're shooting down in the valley, well, you're at sea level or below, and the mountains on each side are 10,000 feet. Well, the sun goes away pretty quick.
Yeah.
So there's certain locations that, like this time of year in January, come 3:30, it's done. That one location's done. You have to go to another, and then like I've shooting out at the sand dunes, for example. About 4:30, you have about a 15-minute window from about 4:15 to 4:30 to where you get that just perfect side light, where it gets all the textures in the sand, the great shadows, and then the mountains in the background as well. So it's such a challenging place to shoot. I am just so grateful for the opportunity to be there for a whole month.
Yeah.
My past visits, I've always been there for a week, and the difference the best thing was having the prior experience of knowing what I wanted to shoot and where I wanted to go, and understanding how long it takes to get to those places, and then walk out to the locations. So this past, having those prior experiences and being there for a month, it's really given me an opportunity to capture so much more than I could in the previous visits in a week.
Yeah.
It's interesting when I look through your photos on your website. I love color. As an artist painting, we were taught a long time ago to paint the picture first in raw umber and ultraviolet blue mixed together, which almost made black, and no white, just in black. But you let the canvas or the thinness of the paint be the lighter colors, So you
Right.
get it all in black, and then you'd come back and put colored glazes over and
Right.
paint that way. And then there's the other side where you just go and get the red paint and the blue paint, and you mix the colors that you want and just directly paint. So that, in a way, I'm looking at your black and white photography as the one way I was taught to paint.
Mm.
You know, it's interesting that you have so much more detail and depth.
It's very well. A lot of that, I don't shoot as much infrared now as I used to, because it's harder to get the film and it's so expensive. And so I shoot a lot more traditional black and white than infrared now. But through shooting years and years of infrared, that is what kind of taught me that reverse way of looking at it. Like you're talking about painting, you're almost looking at the negative space, and then you're letting your highlights build on that negative space, or looking at your shadow, looking at the textures, and your highlights are your touch or your emphasis, you know, your accents. And that is, it's just kind of one of my, one of the ways that I kind of envision places when I see it. And that's the whole shooting infrared. You have to shoot in the first hour or the last hour of light, because that's when the infrared sensitivity is at its highest. So by years and years and years of doing that, I learned those techniques a little bit, and I've applied them now, you know, for years and years, to shoot them regular black and white as well, to make regular black and white look like infrared. And almost every time, no matter where I'm at, the racetrack out, one of the hardest places to get in Death Valley, it's up in the very north part of the park, and you drive on a 28-mile four-wheel drive road that's just ridiculous to get out there. It takes you about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours to get out there on this road. And truly the only time that the light's right there is that either the first or the end of the day. And that's the only way that you can pick up the trenches of the moving rocks and the honeycomb of the playa. And it really makes it real three-dimensional once you have that last light. But if you're there in the middle of the day, you're like, well, I can't hardly see the shadow of the, you know, where the trench of the rock was. It's just not the same. And there's the whole park, whether it's Zabriskie Point or 20 Mule Canyon or the Artist Palette, especially Artist Palette in the afternoon is just, it's unbelievable. But in the middle of the day, it's just, and you'll see most amateurs, because they won't get up at the early hour or stay out late because they have to go to dinner or whatever. They'll be shooting all this during the middle of the day, and it's just not the same.
Right.
And it's a simple thing of just knowing, hey, the last 2 hours really of the day, the first hour is going to always be really good. And there's something about the light in the winter, because of the sun's so far in the southern sky, that it really gives a good angle. I've been there in March where it's just not the same. I've been there in October where I feel it's just not the same. And then of course, a lot of the tourists and stuff go, you know, spring and even in summer and early fall, and the temperatures there can be just absolutely brutal. So January, February, December, I've every time I've gone in those months, it's just so much more comfortable, and it allows you to see so much more, because you can the hikes aren't as difficult because of the heat. You don't have to carry as much water. All those things take in effect.
Right. And I'm looking at Zabriskie Point, your photo on your website, and everyone, again, it's CodyBrothers.com. It's BROS, to go check it out and go through the portfolio. And I'm looking at Zabriskie Point, and it's really interesting how the formations are. It actually looks like human skin. It's just, I'm looking at it. There's a really an amount of detail that comes out. And again, like you're saying, the lighting part of it and how the clouds are, you just have this whole different view of what
shot in particular is in the afternoon. I actually shot that one in the afternoon where we took the workshops it's a little different. It's not actually at the overlook point, but it's down in the actual gulch, and so it takes a little bit to get to that point, but the folds in the rocks are what's so everywhere in that park. What's amazing about it to me is pretty much my concentration on the way I shoot there is the effects of the elements on the location, because that location is completely created by the elements, whether it be wind, water, or volcanic, fire, volcanic activity. It is completely molded by that. And the folds and the things you see are basically the runoffs from when it does rain, or they do get moisture, or they do get precipitation that make all the different alluvials to where it all drains out into the valley. And those are the things that the light, once you get that low light or the angle, it really accentuates that. And there are locations, I shot a location just the other day up by the big crater up on the north part of the park, that in the last light, it just looked like a maze. The side of the hill looked like one big maze because of the way the drainage coming off the hill, it created the valleys and the little, I'd call them alluvials, all over the sides of the mountains, and they just they really, really come out with the late light or the morning light, and you'll see it all over the park. And whether it's the older petrified dunes that you see that are at the base of mountains to the regular dunes that are constantly changing, and the shadows, everything change on it because of the wind,
And the other part too, we talk about that with the geology and capturing that, but when you go into looking at your photos, like at Chaco Culture National Historical Park and Fort Union National Monument, there is like it's like just looking at the ruins, there's it's like a different feeling, almost like a spirited feeling. Like, I don't want to say ghosts or anything, but it's.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, though. That's what I'm going for. A little background, I was a painter and an illustrator before I was a photographer. And I went to school to be an illustrator and a painter. And before about semester and a half before I graduated, my main professor, he asked me, he said, so where do you get your inspiration, your images from? And I said, well, I shoot a camera. I go and photograph, and I draw, and I did a lot of pen and ink and watercolor and pen and ink, with watercolor backgrounds with pen and ink on top and stuff. And he said, well, would you mind sharing your photographs with me? And I said, no, I'll bring him in. And he took one look at my photographs, and he said, you need to concentrate on photography. You're going to be a much better photographer than you'll ever be an illustrator or painter. He goes, he says, you'll have quite a career if you concentrate on this. And I was like, well, great to know now after I've gone through all this. And from that moment on, the way infrared, black and white, were always very dreamy and very dramatic, and had this feeling that was what was in my head, in my dreams, in my vision. And that is the biggest thing that I tried to transfer to all my work, is that dream world feeling that it's not, I'm not trying to document something. I'm trying to give it, I'm trying to make it look like another universe, another reality, another place. And whether it's the type of film I use, the way I filter the film, the time of day I shoot, the way I shoot the locations, that contrast, that the black skies, all those things are this dream world that I am trying to create. I have besides shooting parks, I shoot a lot of abandoned things. I for years and years, and where I'm from in New Mexico, you have little abandoned towns everywhere, and I'm always on the interstate on old Route 66, and have all these abandoned gas stations, which I love, and stuff like that. That it's just odd, and you end up kind of going through these places, and you'll find like a bike, an old rusted bike on the ground with grass all growing up through it, and stuff like that has always inspired that dream world kind of feeling to me. I was very influenced by Salvador Dali when I was in art school, and his paintings. And going to school in Florida, I used to go to St. Petersburg where the museum is, and I would go every month. They would have, bring in new work from Spain, and they would have and I would go every month and just inundate myself with Salvador Dali's work. And I was always so discouraged because I was like, I could never get there as a painter or, as an illustrator, but I was always felt, once I got that information from my professor and I really concentrated on it, I was like, wow, I can get there with this medium. And it took years and years of practicing, perfecting it before I actually showed it. And I'm still messing around with it today. I'm starting to, one of the great things about this artist in residence, and once again being somewhere for a month, I can't thank the MPAF enough for it. Is you find yourself, you go shoot what you're intended to in the morning or in the afternoon, and then you have all this time in the middle of the day to kind of experiment. And I've been experimenting with a lot of double exposures. So what I've been doing is I've been taking a shot with, I shoot pinhole cameras as well. So I have real extensive exposure times with them. So what I've been doing is I'll shoot my, landscape, or like a Joshua tree, for example. I got really into this one section where there was a bunch of Joshua trees in the north part of the park. And I would shoot the Joshua tree and expose it 2/3 or half of the time I normally would. And then I would take a close up of the spines and the hairs on the Joshua tree and double expose that into the image. And I've really, it's a whole new series of work that's come about from just this one, residency. And I'm really excited about how these are going to go. When I was when I was out there previously, I was doing a grant for the National Endowment of the Arts. I felt more obligated to shoot, my lens cameras and have everything real sharp and, for presentation. Well, in this residency, I've been really shooting a lot more pinhole stuff and longer exposures, and I've had really good cloud formations out there. So using the longer exposures to draw the clouds to make them look like they're really skewed. And the other thing that does too is you get the movement of the shadow over the rocks.
Right.
So
yeah, you've got a lot of movement, and then at the same time, like I was saying, there's that balance of movement, stillness, dreamy, like you're saying, there's that spiritual vibe of a different place, but it does you everything is otherworldly.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I'm going for.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the biggest compliment. anyone, when they look at my work, can give me is to say that it gives me a real ghostly feeling, a real dream world feeling about it, because that's my goal. I'm I don't want to be Edward Weston. I don't want to be Ansel Adams. I want to be as far from that as I can be, but I use their techniques to help me get to that point. And I think that there has to be a balance between that traditional feel and what I'm doing, which is a little bit more non-traditional, a lot more contrasty, a lot more moody. There's more pictorial instead of documentorial. It's always been a point of a lot of your traditional photographers. I mean, many books written about it back in the 30s and the 40s about how photography shouldn't be like a painting, that it shouldn't, photographers shouldn't try to make their work look like a painting. Well, I don't feel that way.
No, I don't. I totally disagree.
I feel the, and that's why normally when I show in several galleries around the country, I show finished work. It's a finished piece. I don't really sell loose prints. I sell small editions in a finished manner that I actually, print them, mount them on a piece of aluminum, put a protective coating over them, a UV coating over them, and float them in a floater frame, very much like a painting would be in a museum. And that's how I present my work, whether it's in an exhibition at a museum or at a gallery. And that's how I try to sell everything as a piece of art that's ready to hang on the wall. It's not just a photograph.
Yeah, I think that your pictures, to me, they are paintings. You're just painting with the camera. To me, because it looks. I'm looking at Mushroom Rock right now, Lake Mead National Recreation Area. The first thing that came to my mind was, now there's a story here. There's a story behind this picture, because it's huge. There's a story here, and it just pulled you in. So I really like.
One of those things that that spot, you have to be on a boat to get to that spot. And that was part of the NEA grant, was me shooting. That was one of the ones that they requested, was me shooting Lake Mead recreational area. And the first thing I thought, because I had shot Lake Mead from the overlooks and all, and you drive around it. And the very first, as soon as they said, well, we want you to shoot here, I was like, well, we're renting a houseboat. Cool. So we rented a houseboat for a week, and I asked the guys at the where I rented the boat. I said, where are the really good places to stay overnight and tie down overnight and have a great view for the morning. One guy says, you got to go to Mushroom Rock. And it's on a real other side of the lake and the whole thing. And we went the first time, and we stayed there overnight, and I got up and was ready, first light, shot in the morning, the whole thing. And I had no clouds that day. And the shot was great. I knew when I came back and I processed it, it was great. And I was like, well, we got to go back out there again. So the next October, we rented a boat again and went back out there, same spot, and, really kept an eye on the weather. And sure enough, I had an amazing morning that morning, that the clouds were just incredible, and not much wind. So I got that real glassy look on the water, and it almost looks like I'm very familiar with Monument Valley because of being from the Four Corners, and it almost looks like Monument Valley on the water,
like the Three Sisters, and then when you look at it, but what we'd say would be it, to me, almost is like ancient Egyptian, like a goddess, and the way the clouds are
Queen
moving.
Nefertiti.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's
That's
almost
who
like
it is.
she's like got
Yeah.
her third eye open, and all of this
Yeah.
stuff is coming. Like she's connecting with the universe, and then the other side is like, "Hey, we want in," and she's like, "No, you can't come in." The way the
He's
clouds are on
guardian.
the others, it is crazy
Creepy.
how the clouds go with the rock formations. How they just that's like one of those. That's epic. That is really a cool. What a cool
It
experience.
it lasted that it was one of the actually it was one of my favorite memories, photo memories, because that moment lasted for about an hour.
Oh
Because
man.
of the way the sun kept hiding itself behind clouds as it was coming up, so it kept changing. The whole everything kept changing. So I ended up shooting probably a dozen rolls of 120 films, and like I said, I get 4 shots on with my panoramic camera. I get 4 shots per roll. So for about an hour, I just kept changing the roll and kept shooting. So I have about 40 really good images of that shot, and it was really hard to edit which one that I liked the best, because of the light being just a little bit different, the water being just a little bit more still, and that one was about. The one that you're looking at was about 30 minutes from the sun coming up.
Wow.
It wasn't right at the very first light. It was about 30 minutes after the sun had come up.
That is awesome.
But it's one of my favorite. It was just being on a houseboat on Lake Mead, and the different things that you saw were. It was just such a great. Highly recommend that experience. I definitely want to go like in October. That's when I went both times. When the rush of the normal crowds from the summer are gone, and the temperatures are a lot cooler, and there's not as many people renting the boats, and they give you a great discount on the boat. And as long as you get somebody, I have a friend that is assistant of mine, that he's a painter. I show at his gallery here in Santa Fe, and he's from Massachusetts, so he grew up driving boats.
Oh,
so
cool.
it was a good fit. He drove me all around, and I would say, okay, we need to back into this cove, and then I need you to stop. And so it was another challenging experience too, of shooting off the back of a boat, or shooting off the top of the boat.
Yeah, because you're moving. Wow, awesome experiences. And like you say, there's always a story behind every photo, and the photo tells its own story. So it's always fascinating to chat with you, photographers, and have you on the show here, Cody. Thank you so much. We could talk to you for hours, because I know you've got a bunch of experiences to share.
I've got so many. Everyone does have a story, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, again, go take a look at Cody's website. It's CodyBrothers.com, and that's BROS, so CodyBrothers.com. Also, photographers, go to VisionsPhotolab.com, and they're based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Beautiful Santa Fe. We love it. We were in Santa Fe this past summer, and now we have to go back because we love that whole region. I also want to give a shout out to the National Parks Arts Foundation. Again, go to their website, nationalparksartsfoundation.org. Really, artists, again, writers, poets. It's open to every medium of art. And really, you want to get on their newsletter list and follow them on social media, because they always have these awesome opportunities. And when they come, you want to submit, and then hopefully get that residency. But if you don't, do it again. And there's always these opportunities, and a lot of them come and go real fast. So that's why I was saying, get on their newsletter list and social media. We want to thank you, listeners, for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. We air out in so many different outlets, from Spreaker and iHeartRadio to iTunes, Apple, Google, Blog Talk, everything. So that's the best place to go to keep up with our shows. We air Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. And we want to close with some awesome music. We always like to play music for our guests, and this is a song called Sands of Time. It is by the band, it's the Bay Station Band. They're based out of Northern California. And actually, they're always, they play music on a boat. So I half of the time see them on a boat in the Bay Area. But this is from their album, Other Desert Cities, which is from their visit to Joshua Tree National Park, not so far from Death Valley. So here it is, Sands of Time. Thanks so much, Cody.
Thanks, Cody.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Shoes, now the sand by the door, from walking in the desert with you. Sand by the door, now the sand on the floor, tracked in from the street on our bare feet. Sands of time adrift on the floor. I can't really tell anymore what's yours or what's mine. That's because of the sands of time. It all adds up. So many kinds of luck, hidden treasures to find. All this mining, you gotta dig around to find the diamonds hidden in the ground. Sands of time adrift on the floor. I can't really tell anymore what's yours or what's mine. That's because of the sands of time. If it all breaks down into so much dust, you might lose your money, you might lose your sleep.